Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 664. 664. January the 16th, 2019, Wednesday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Well, of course it is Wednesday. That's the day I take out the trash and have a little pasta. A little trash, a little pasta. Yeah. So, thank you so much for tuning in. Let's go ahead and get to it. Mostly what I'm going to talk about here in a little while is the hearings today for hopefully the Attorney General, or Trump's hopeful Attorney General, William Barr. But before we get to that, let's just go ahead and go through a few other things that are of note. Let's see. We have Preet Bharara, who many of you are very familiar with. Trump fired his ass a long time ago. He was a U.S. attorney. He was involved in bringing vessel Niskaya into the country, giving her that special visa. And he's commented today, or yesterday, he commented that if Trump wishes to withdraw from NATO, he should be promptly impeached, convicted, and removed from office. Now, that's not an example of a U.S. attorney or DOJ employee being political, is it? The fact of the matter is, the President of the United States, if he wanted to pull out of NATO, he can do that. That's one of the things the President gets to do. Now, typically, a President would not pull out of something like NATO unless there was a consensus for it, and he wouldn't just do it off the top of his head. There would have to be some reason for it. Now, Trump had made reference to this back during the campaign, but mainly what he was doing was he was sending a message to the Europeans that, hey, you need to start paying your fair share, and we need to reevaluate the mission of NATO. And he's absolutely correct on both points. For the past, God knows how many years, the Europeans who had an agreement with us of how much they would contribute to NATO have not been contributing their fair share. The American taxpayer has been footing the bill mostly for NATO for a very long time. And really, when you think about it, a lot of these NATO countries should be paying us. But instead, we end up having the taxpayers have to pay to defend their countries. Now, I know there's a lot of other things going on there. But I should also mention to you that a lot of people aren't aware of this, but when I was in Germany, and when we were out on field training exercises, once we completed our exercise, we had to pull our vehicles off to the sides of the road, and we had to wait for the German Foreign Minister's Department or Interior Department to come and walk through all the area where we had been training to see how much damage that we did. And they would have these books with tickets, and they would literally write a stack of tickets that thick for damage to, the grass, the trees, whatever. When you're driving around these heavy vehicles in a, forest, you're going to run over trees. You're going to dig trenches. You're going to do various things with these heavy vehicles. So we would always have to wait for the German interior people to write their tickets and give them to our battalion commander so they could go submit them, which ultimately would end up at the DOD somewhere in the States, and it would be taken out of our defense budget, I'm sure. So we had the Germans charging us, fining us for making trenches in the ground, running over the grass, running over some trees here and there. And so we would have to pay these fines, despite the fact that, we were there defending their country. We were, doing very much for their economy, because with all those American soldiers and their spouses and everyone else spending money in the German economy, we were helping their economy. So we were a benefit to them, yet they were fining us for damaging their property, and they certainly weren't paying us to be there. In fact, as we know, they weren't paying their fair share. A lot of other things going on there. So Trump was correct when he was out campaigning and when he first became president, before he had his first meeting with the Europeans, saying, hey, you need to pull your weight. We had an agreement, and you're not living up to your end of the agreement of how much money that you should be paying into NATO. The second thing about NATO is NATO was created primarily to be a sort of a backstop or to prevent communism in the Soviet Union from spreading communism anywhere throughout Europe. We were trying to hold the line at the Soviet border. And so NATO was a way of putting together an organization that we could name countries and say, okay, they're going to join our union, the NATO union, and therefore, to you, the Soviet Union, hands off these countries. Don't try to meddle in these countries. If you do, then you'll be meddling with a NATO country, and that will bring all the NATO countries, including the United States, to have to take up the issue with you. And we will defend these countries, if need be, with military force. So NATO was really a Cold War U.S. versus USSR policy to stop the spread of communism throughout Europe. So that was really what NATO was all about from the very beginning. Of course, we no longer have a Soviet Union. And so what Trump was saying was that laying out this case, but saying, hey, there still is a need for NATO, but the mission has changed. We no longer have to be a bulwark against the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union doesn't exist. Now we have Russia, but Russia isn't really a threat. They're not going to start knocking off, European countries or anything. Nor are they attempting to spread communism throughout the world. They're not even a communist country themselves anymore. But he said, hey, there's issues on terrorism and there's other things where we should be focusing our energy. But the old mission of NATO no longer is relevant. And so we need to rethink that. And you need to pay your fair share. That was the two issues that Trump was raising. Valid issues. And, if he determined that that the Europeans weren't going to pay their fair share and that they weren't interested in modifying the mission and what we do in NATO, then he would have had every right to make the case that we should end NATO, or at least we are NATO. I mean, if we pulled out of NATO, that would be the end of NATO. There really is no NATO without the United States. So, here we have the Europeans. They want to have their own military. They want an EU army. So why would we need to have a NATO alliance if the Europeans and the European Union decide to create their own EU military? What would be the point? All the countries that are in the EU are former NATO members, most of them, and so it wouldn't be any point to it. In fact, we might find ourselves at odds. You might find NATO countries who are also members of the EU having policy differences between the two that would come to loggerheads at some point. You can end up with a real mess. So certainly Trump had every right to question the usefulness of NATO. And, if he wanted to go out and make the case that we shouldn't be spending the money on this organization anymore and that we should find another way to deal with other things, he certainly would have that right. But when you get someone like Preet Bharara making a statement like this, which is purely political, and it's an incendiary type comment designed to provoke some more hate, probably a response from Trump, or just to stir the pot, is really all it is. And it's a very political statement made from a former U.S. attorney. So we don't really have any much use for Preet Bharara. That's why Trump fired him. But we should bring him in and question him about his role in the cover-up of the Right Reverend Clinton investigation. We should find out what his role was in bringing Maria Vetselnskaya into the country. We should find out if he had anything to do with bringing Mr. Greenberg into the country on that informant visa. So there are some questions that we should have for Mr. Bharara, seeing as how he wants to get in the game here a little bit. Maybe they should subpoena him. But just another example of anti-Trump partisan hack at the DOJ, which we're told doesn't exist, but just another example to prove that it does. We are now at day 25 of the shutdown, which I think makes it the longest shutdown in history, which is just fine. The previous record was held by the Clinton administration. But now it appears that there are more and more demo-commies coming out to support the border wall. And so Nancy and Chuck, they may not realize it, but Nancy and Chuck are losing more and more support every day. Every day we're seeing more and more Democrats come out and abandon the Nancy and Chuck policy, or the Nancy and Chuck approach, or Nancy and Chuck's tactic or strategy in the shutdown. More and more Democrats coming out saying, look, no problem with the wall. Yeah, we need some wall here and some wall there. Maybe we don't need it here, maybe we don't need it there. But yeah, there's nothing real immoral about a wall. We already have walls. And so yeah, I mean, I could support voting for the wall. It's not a problem for me. So now we're having more and more Democrats. So what do we see happening here? Well, if Trump and the Republicans can stay together for another week or two, we're eventually going to get to the point where Nancy and Chuck will realize that their band of demo commies that they thought they could count on are abandoning them. More importantly, what you might end up with is that you might have enough Democrats in the House and Democrats in the Senate that you could actually get a bill passed which would open the government and fund Trump's border wall. The only obstacle to that would be Chuck and Nancy. Well, not so much Chuck, because he has no control over it. He's the minority leader, but Nancy is the Speaker of the House. So it would likely be her. Now, Republicans could certainly bring the bill up. A bunch of Republicans could get together with, what do they need, like 32, 33 Democrats? If all the Republicans in the House were able to get 32, 33 Democrats to sign on to it, they could introduce a bill, and it could go through committee. And if the Democrats who had the committees or Pelosi didn't stop it, it could actually get a floor vote. And if it were to pass, it would go on to the Senate. And if McConnell could pick off 8 or 10 Democrats, they could get the bill done there. So it's very possible that what you could see happen here is Chuck and Nancy could stick to their guns because they're so dug in, and some other hardliners like them could dig in. People, representatives or senators who are in, very, very blue states, they could stay dug in, but they could allow these Democrats who are in purple states or red states or in tough districts or border districts, they could allow them to jump ship and vote for it and get it done. So Nancy and Chuck could effectively allow the shutdown to end. They could allow Trump to get the money for his wall, while they, Nancy and Chuck, and a few hardliners could still stick to their guns and say, yeah, we didn't cave. We had about 25 or 35 Democrats in the House that caved and signed onto it, and we had 10 Democrats in the Senate that signed onto it, and they were able to get the wall funding, but we never gave in. So this may be a strategy that Chuck and Nancy are going to pursue, either by choice or they'll be forced to accept that this is going to happen, because eventually these Democrats in these swing states or red states are going to start applying the pressure, and they'll start reaching across the aisle to Republicans. They'll go over to McCarthy and say, hey, I've got 25 or 35 Democrats. If you can get this number of Republicans, we can get enough votes to get this out of the House to get the border wall funding. And if McConnell can get 10 Democrats who are in the same situation, very likely it could happen that way. And that's why Trump's trying to stay with the keeping it within the Congress and not declaring a national emergency. So we'll see how it's going. But at this point, Republicans are sticking together, but we are seeing defections on the demo-commie side. That nutcase, Mazie Hirono, from Hawaii, was trying to get Barr to recuse himself today. And she was using Sessions as the example. But he basically said, no, my situation and the Sessions situation are totally different. And he said, I don't know all the facts in the Sessions situation, but from what I do know, he probably should have recused himself. But that has no bearing on me. So as far as me recusing myself from the Russia investigation or Uncle Bob or anything else, no, I'm not going to recuse myself. I don't need to, and I'm not going to. So that was kind of good to see that Barr does at least ways stand up for himself there. He's not anywhere near as soft in the underbelly as Sessions was. Well, Theresa May brought her bill up today, and it failed as everybody knew it would. In fact, it was a historical failure. It was one of the worst defeats of a bill, I think, in like 100 years or something. Certainly, it was an epic fail for Theresa May. The vote was 432 to 202. Generally, if you know a bill is going to fail that bad, you don't even bring it up. But she really had to. She really had to bring up this bill because that's all she's got right now. And I think she had to go on the record with it. So it goes down to defeat. And so this is the bill everybody's been talking about, the horrible bad Brexit bill, which really wouldn't have been a Brexit at all. So anyway, it went down. It was shot down in flames, just like we knew. It was shot down in flames in a major way. And normally, or not, I shouldn't say normally, but a lot of times when a prime minister has a vote get defeated this badly on an issue of this importance, that generally leads to their stepping down, and then you'll have a vote for a new election. But at this point, Theresa May has not stepped down or given an indication that she would. Certainly a lot of whisper campaign going on there. But I think she's going to give it one last shot. I understand that a week from now, on the 21st of January, she is going to introduce one of two or possibly two different bills. One would be a bill that would I think try to have another Brexit vote, a second referendum vote, which I don't think will fly, or a modified version of this bill here that got shot down, which I understand will probably get shot down as well. Will get shot down also. So it looks like there'll be another type of a bill coming up on the 21st, a week from now, and they'll put a vote to that. Doesn't appear there's any great support for that, either of those two options. So it's very likely that bill will also go down to defeat. And if it does, then it's possible that Theresa May could be sort of forced out, and they would have snap elections or whatever, and have a vote, have a new vote, I guess, for a new prime minister, and depending on how things go, I mean, you could end up with Jeremy Corbyn. It's not, I don't think it's likely, but I mean, you never know, and that would probably be as bad as this Brexit deal vote. I don't know. They're both hard to imagine. Brits signing on to either of those things, but you certainly don't want to see Jeremy Corbyn as prime minister, but you certainly don't want this Brexit bill that she's trying to force down people's throats, which is not a Brexit bill at all. It's not what the people voted for. In the last poll I saw, over 80% of the people who voted for Brexit still believe in Brexit, real Brexit, actual Brexit. So things are continuing to be very dicey in that situation. We'll continue to watch it. Well, we have, we have this lunatic on CNN. Of course, everyone at CNN is a lunatic. This one here is a political strategist, I guess, named Areva Martin. Areva Martin was the guest on the radio show of David Webb. And she started going off on David Webb, talking about his white privilege. So he let her go on and on about white privilege. And then he finally, when she got done with her diatribe, he advised her that he's not white, he's black. And made her look like a real idiot. And the only thing she could really say to that is that she got bad information. She wasn't told he was black. That's CNN for you. Fake news. Well, a couple days ago, I told you that Judicial Watch had gone to court. Again, this is part of this Hillary Clinton email investigation and her private server investigation that Judicial Watch is doing. That judge in that case now has ruled 2 consecutive previous times in favor of Judicial Watch. He's the one that forced Hillary Clinton to have to answer those questions. Last week, less than a week ago, Judicial Watch requested depositions of Susan Rice and Ben Rhodes. Today, the judge ruled on that. And so, we learned today that Susan Rice and Ben Rhodes will be deposed under oath by Judicial Watch lawyers in regards to the Benghazi scandal. Now, the only thing is, in these, because I'm sure they would love to ask about Benghazi, if it was a gun-running operation and what they knew about the gun-running operation, because remember, it's a deposition under oath, or what Hillary may have known about a gun-running operation in Benghazi. I'm sure they would love to ask those questions, but I think that this particular deal here is specifically about Clinton's server, who set it up, why they set it up, and who knew about it, and all these sorts of things. So it's probably a more limited scope. I wouldn't be surprised to see Judicial Watch's lawyers ask maybe some questions related to that gun running in Benghazi, but they might get told, you can't really go there, you can't really ask those questions, that's out of scope. So they have to follow, I think, pretty much a scope of questioning. But one of the things, there's a list of things they're interested in, but one of the main things that they're going to be trying to nail Rice and Rhodes down on is whether or not the emails, the Right Reverend Clinton destroyed those 30,000 emails because they had something to do with Benghazi, or did she set up the private server to obstruct people from being able to get information or emails in regards to Benghazi. So this is the angle Judicial Watch is taking, is that she set up the private server to avoid people learning things about Benghazi. Now, this, I guess it was about a year ago, they were using the same argument, but instead of Benghazi, they were talking about the Clinton Foundation. Judicial Watch was saying, hey, they set up the private server to avoid people finding out about what was going on with the Clinton Foundation. And they had some success on that line of questioning as well. And they got a lot of information there. So it appears that that continues to move forward. Judicial Watch continues to get some results. And so it'll be very interesting to see what they learn about Susan Rice and Ben Rhodes. And it will be very interesting to know whether or not the line of questioning, the scope of the line of questioning, how far they can go, how much leniency the judge will allow, whether or not he'll force them to stay on the path of strictly the server, who set it up, why they set it up, with the emails to cover up Benghazi or this or that or the other thing, whether or not he will let them delve into whether or not there was arms being moved through Libya, whether or not Hillary knew about it, whether or not Rhodes knew about it, whether or not Rice knew about it. They would have known about it, by the way. So it'll be interesting to see if they're allowed to go down that road of questioning, and I hope they are. And if they are, that could be some very bombshell information. Certainly questions that Rice and Rhodes do not want to answer. That's a fact. Well, a group of angel moms showed up, and angel moms, of course, are mothers whose kids have been killed by illegal immigrants. And of course, we learned last week that Nancy Pelosi is not taking any meetings with any angel moms. So a group of angel moms today stormed Pelosi's office and started chanting, "Build the wall. Build the wall." So they showed up in Pelosi's office and started their chant. Angel moms. She doesn't really want to hear from angel moms, but it's got to be very tough for the staffers in her office. You know, it's got to be very embarrassing for them, because how do you kick these women out or escort these women out, you know, when they have such a, you know, issue to take up with you? And my guess is that Pelosi staffers were probably at a loss for words. They know that Pelosi won't allow any dialogue with any of these people, but she doesn't. She's not in her office to have to deal with it. It's her staffers that are in her office who have to face these women, which is probably pretty hard for them to do because they really don't have a very good position to be in. It's pretty sad when the Speaker of the House will not even allow a conversation or have a conversation or even hear from, you know, these people who have a real issue. So there you go. I expect that there'll be more of that to come as the pressure continues to mount on Madam Botox and Chuck the Cuck. Gateway Pundit has confirmed that FBI lawyer, former general counsel James Baker, is and has been under investigation for leaking. Well, we heard this months ago on Conservative Treehouse. Last Refuge was talking about this, so this is not new. But there's people suggesting that he may be close to being indicted. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know what close to being indicted means. Either you are or you aren't. But yeah, I mean, we heard this months ago. I assume it's still going on. He's still under investigation for leaking, but we already knew that. Whether or not he's going to be indicted, well, if he is, do it. Let me know when he is. I'll report on it and put it on my timeline. John Kasich, Benedict Kasich, has gone over to CNN. Why? So that between now and 2020, John Kasich, Benedict Kasich, can trash Trump every day on CNN. Where else? And that shouldn't surprise us about Kasich. The last thing he did here in Ohio before he left was he vetoed our stand your ground law that we were trying to get passed here in Ohio, that had passed both houses of the Ohio Senate and Ohio House. And the last thing he did on his way out the door was to veto the stand your ground law. Fortunately, our new governor has just been sworn in, and hopefully they'll bring the bill back, and hopefully he will sign it. Although he's not much better, but he's not as bad as Kasich. At least not at this point. Let's give him some time. So John Kasich now works for CNN as a commentator. His job, trashing Trump every day. That's his job. He's a turncoat of Benedict Arnold. What did Washington say he was going to do to Benedict Arnold if he ever got his hands on him? Hang him. He was going to hang him. We're hearing that Mueller has been trying to get a face-to-face, in-person interview with Trump. And Giuliani has said, pound sand. Pound sand. Well, you know, Mr. Giuliani, I told you about a month and a half ago when you caved and allowed Trump to answer those questions, written questions. I told you this is exactly what was going to happen. You should have said pound sand back then. And from day one, when Mueller was announced as special counsel, you should have exposed him, his entire crew, their relationships with Comey and Mueller and Rodenstein, Comey and Rodenstein. You should have exposed the whole group. And from day one, called them out for what they are. But no, you let them gain credibility for 2 years, and now you're trying to play hardball with them, and it's tougher. You should never have, allowed Trump to even answer those questions. Should never even respond to Mueller. I understand they got off on the wrong foot, but since Rudy's come into the game in about the last 9 months or so, he's been playing the game as well. And if I would have been brought in 9 months ago, I would have came out and made my opening statement would have been 9 months ago when this thing started, we should have pointed out exactly what this is. It wasn't done, but now I'm his lawyer, so I'm going to point out exactly what this is. And let me say from this point forward, we will not even acknowledge Uncle Bob. He can do whatever he wants. We're just not going to acknowledge him. We're not going to talk about him, answer questions, submit documents, do anything. We're not going to do anything. Nothing. And if he wants to go to court, let's go to court. Let's go to court. I'll bring my evidence, you bring yours. That's what I would have done. French police are now going to be carrying live ammo. I guess they still have rubber bullets and tear gas and water cannons, but I guess now they're going to actually give them live ammo. And that's a little bit risky because, if something happens and some French cop decides to actually use live ammo, real ammo, and they start shooting French yellow vest protesters, that is going to cause that's going to probably lead to civil war within the country. That will escalate the situation by about 100 times overnight. It will also spread to other countries throughout the EU. I can't believe that I would think they would do just the opposite. I remember whenever we were thrown into situations where there were large protests in public places, they did not let us have live rounds. We were only allowed to defend ourselves using the butt of our weapons. We didn't have any rounds. We had our ammo pouches on, but we had no magazines whatsoever, not in our ammo pouches or in our weapons. And if we felt that we were being threatened or someone smacked us or spit in our face or did something like that, we were able to butt stroke them. We were able to use maximum, a type of force. I forget what they called it at that time, but we were able to use whatever amount of force it took to bring the situation under control. But we did not have live ammo on those large demonstrations that were in public places. Now, when they were protesting around a site, a U.S. military site, where we had like storing rocket motors or nuclear warheads or military equipment or barracks or something like that, we did have live rounds, but we didn't post outside the gate. We stayed on the inside of the gate, and German police would be on the outside of the gate. We were only ever given live ammo when we were on the inside of a perimeter fence. Whenever we were on the outside, they never would give us live rounds because they didn't want to have an accident and have someone accidentally shoot someone or feel that their life was threatened and decide they're just going to shoot somebody. So I'm very surprised that the French government is going to have these cops out there with live rounds, knowing how heated things can get and knowing how it only takes one cop who gets freaked out and fires a couple rounds and kills a couple of these yellow vests. That would just blow the situation up and make it 10 times, 100 times worse. I'm really surprised that they're doing that. That's a bad move. It's a bad move. Hope it doesn't happen, but we'll keep watching. The yellow vests are not going away. It's spreading all through Europe, and things are getting much worse. Don't know how it's all going to end in the UK, but somewhere around the 29th of March, they're probably going to leave the EU. That's my guess, and it's probably going to be some sort of a hard Brexit. You have the German economy now very close to recession. The French economy essentially in recession. Many other countries within the Eurozone, many of them not necessarily technically in recession, but struggling greatly. There's a lot of problems coming in the EU. As I've said, 2019 is going to be a very turbulent year. But in a lot of ways, it's for a good reason, for a good cause. Sometimes, the old saying, sometimes you got to fight. You want a little, you want peace, you got to fight for it or whatever. And I think in some of these cases, what you see with going on in the EU and Europe and the UK, sometimes it's you're going to have some violence, some riots, some revolutions, some things like that to right the course. These folks in charge are not going to allow you to peacefully vote your way out of it. They're not going to give you that option, so you use the only option left to you, if freedom is the goal. So, William Barr, basically, I did not get to watch every bit of it. I watched all of Lindsey Graham, I watched all of Feinstein, and I watched a few others. Just as I said yesterday, not surprised all the Democrats tried to pigeonhole Barr into making sure that he would say that he would not interfere with Mueller in any way, shape, or form, let Mueller go on with his investigation. He knows Mueller, he doesn't think Mueller's on a witch hunt, all those sorts of things, all confirmed today. So that would be not good news. On the other hand, Lindsey Graham did press him on oversight of the DOJ and the FBI, and he basically said that he believes in applying the law equally. Lindsey Graham asked him about whether or not he would do an inquiry on the 2016 counter-intel operation launched by the FBI and President Trump, and Barr said yes, he will look into that. He was asked about what he thought about the Page Strzok texts. He said they made him sick. He was asked by Lindsey Graham whether or not he would look into the FISA applications that were taken out, whether or not they were reliable and legal. And he said yes, he would also look into the FISAs, and that if he found wrongdoing, he would hold them people accountable. He said he was bothered by Bruce and Nellie Orr's situation, and he said he does not know them. He said that he will share Mueller's report once it's completed, keeping within the guidelines of the law. He also mentioned to Lindsey Graham that he has appointed 3 special counsels in the past. In case he needs to appoint a special counsel, he understands how and why. He agrees that Sessions probably should have recused himself. He said that he knows Rodenstein has a pretty high opinion of him, but he questions the obstruction case against Trump or any other official. So, again, I'm not counting on Barr. There's some things here that are good, some things here that are bad. I believe half of what I see and none of what I hear. So we'll just have to watch and see what happens with Mr. Barr. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be back tomorrow. More TowerGate. See ya. Bye.